We all know the Tropic of Cancer, right? That line on the map seems pretty simple. But what if it's, I don't know, more than just a line? What if it's dynamic and moving and has this whole history and even geopolitical weight?
That's exactly what we're digging into today. It's way more complex than just a mark on a globe.
Okay.
We're going to unpack it, the science, the name, why it actually shifts around, and the amazing range of places and life it touches.
So the mission is basically to take this abstract line and make it, well, real, a journey.
Precisely. Because understanding it better helps us see the planet maybe a little differently.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. Get ready for some maybe some aha moments, because we're going to see why this line isn't just for map makers. It matters to astronomers, pilots, even defense planners.
It really does.
Okay, so let's start with the basics, but maybe dig a bit deeper than school geography. What exactly defines where the Tropic of Cancer is?
Okay, so fundamentally, it's the northernmost latitude on Earth where the sun can appear directly overhead, like straight up, 90 degrees.
Directly overhead.
Right. And that only happens once a year on the June solstice. That's when the northern hemisphere is tilted most directly towards the sun.
So it marks the edge of the tropics, basically.
Exactly. The northern boundary, anything north of it, the sun is never quite directly overhead, even at its highest point.
And it's got a partner down south, doesn't it?
It does. The Tropic of Capricorn in the southern hemisphere. They're twins, in a way.
Oh.
And they're part of those 5 really key latitude lines. You've got the equator, the 2 tropics, and then the Arctic and Antarctic circles. They kind of frame the whole planet's climate zones.
Right, right. But what determines the exact spot? Why that specific angle around 23.5 degrees? It always seemed a bit random.
Yeah, it seems random, but it's pure astronomy. It all comes down to the tilt of the Earth's axis.
The tilt, okay.
Our planet doesn't spin perfectly upright as it orbits the sun, right? It's tilted over by about 23.4 degrees relative to its orbital plane. And that tilt angle is precisely what defines how far north and south the sun's direct rays can reach. That defines the tropics. If there were no tilt, the sun would always be directly over the equator.
Okay, that makes sense. The tilt causes the seasons, and it also sets the boundaries for the tropics.
You got it.
Now, here's something I've always wondered about the name. Tropic. Okay, I can kind of see that, like turning, the sun turns back south after the solstice, right?
Exactly. Tropic comes from the Greek word trop, which means turn or inclination. It refers to that point where the sun appears to stop moving northward and turn back southward in the sky.
But Cancer, the crab constellation, what's the connection there? That seems, well, odd.
It does seem odd now, but it's a fascinating piece of history. It's like a little time capsule in a name.
A time capsule? How so?
Well, so when this line was named, thousands of years ago, back in centuries BCE, at the moment of the June solstice, if you looked up at the sun's position against the background stars, which you shouldn't do directly, obviously, but astronomically speaking, the sun was located within the boundaries of the constellation Cancer.
So it literally pointed to Cancer in the sky at that key moment?
Precisely. So the name made perfect sense then.
But you said was. Emphasis on the was.
Exactly. That's the kicker. It's not in Cancer anymore.
Really? So where is it now?
Now, during the June solstice, the sun is actually in the constellation Taurus.
Taurus. So the name is completely out of date, astronomically speaking.
Pretty much. It's because of something called the precession of the equinoxes.
Okay, precession. Sounds complicated.
It's basically a very slow wobble in the Earth's axis, like a spinning top slowing down. It takes about 26,000 years to complete one wobble cycle.
Wow.
And over millennia, that wobble has caused the apparent position of the solstices and equinoxes against the background stars to drift. So the name Tropic of Cancer is stuck in the past, reflecting the sky from over 2,000 years ago.
That's actually amazing. A name that's outlived its own astronomical accuracy. That's a great aha moment right there.
Isn't it? Makes you think about other labels we use.
Totally. And speaking of things not being fixed, I always picture these lines, you know, the tropics, the equator, as totally static on maps, like they're drawn on permanently.
Yeah.
But you mentioned earlier it moves. The Tropic of Cancer isn't actually fixed.
That's right. Challenging that mental image is key. It's definitely not fixed. Its latitude is constantly, albeit slowly, changing.
So why? If the tilt defined it, does the tilt itself change?
Yes, exactly. There are 2 main drivers. One is that precession wobble we just talked about.
Okay.
And the other is a long-term variation in the amount of the axial tilt itself. It's not always exactly 23.4 degrees.
Oh, interesting. It varies.
Yeah, over a very long cycle, about 41,000 years, the tilt actually oscillates. It swings back and forth between roughly 22.1 degrees and 24.5 degrees.
41,000 years.
Okay.
So these are huge timescales we're talking about.
Immense timescales.
Yeah.
But because the tilt is constantly changing, even subtly, the lines defined by that tilt the tropics and the polar circles have to move too.
So what's the current situation? How fast is it moving right now? Is it noticeable?
Well, noticeable depends on your tools, I guess. As of the year 2000, the tilt was about 23.4 degrees, and the Tropic of Cancer is currently drifting south.
Southward. Okay. By how much?
By almost half an arcsecond of latitude per year.
That sounds many, all right?
An arcsecond is 3/306 of a degree.
Yeah, sounds minuscule.
But that tiny angle translates to roughly 15 meters or about 49 feet on the ground every single year.
Wait, 49 feet, 15 meters a year. That's actually quite a lot. You could measure that easily.
You definitely could. Over a decade, that's 150 meters. Over a lifetime, it shifted significantly.
So does that have practical implications? Like, are old maps wrong?
Yeah.
Or those roadside markers you sometimes see?
It absolutely does. For really precise work, yes, you need updated coordinates. And those markers, think about it, a marker put up 50 or 100 years ago.
It's in the wrong place now.
Yeah.
Significantly so.
Exactly. For example, they know it was precisely at 23 degrees 27 minutes north back in 1917. But by 2045, it's projected to be at 23 degrees 26 minutes north. That shift is real, and any physical marker becomes a historical snapshot, not a current pinpoint.
That really drives home how dynamic the Earth is,
Yeah.
even in ways we think are fixed. What about the Tropic of Capricorn down south? Is it drifting too?
Yes, it moves in lockstep. As the tilt changes, both tropics shift and the Arctic and Antarctic circles shift as well.
Ah, okay.
So the Tropic of Cancer drifts south, the Arctic Circle drifts north, and the Tropic of Capricorn drifts north, the Antarctic Circle drifts south. They all move together.
So the distance between them stays pretty much the same, the width of the tropical zone.
Essentially constant, yes. It's all tied to that single variable, the axial tilt.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, so we know what it is, why it's named what it is, and that it's surprisingly mobile. Let's talk about the where. What kind of world does this shifting line actually pass through?
Geographically, it's a really significant boundary. Like we said, north of it are the subtropics and the North Temperate Zone. South of it, down to the Tropic of Capricorn, is the region simply called the tropics.
And a lot of people live north of it, right?
An incredible number. Back in 2000, data showed that over half the world's population lived north of the Tropic of Cancer, which might be surprising given the huge populations in tropical countries like India, Indonesia, Brazil.
Yeah, that is surprising. So it divides more than just climate zones.
In a way, yes. And if you were standing right on the line, you'd notice the daylight hours changing quite a bit through the year.
How so?
Well, at the summer solstice June, you'd get about 13 hours and 35 minutes of daylight. Longest day.
Makes sense.
But come the winter solstice in December, it drops down to only about 10 hours and 41 minutes. That contrast really shows the tilt in action.
Okay, let's take that trip. Let's circumnavigate along the Tropic of Cancer. It hits 17 countries, you said, and several water bodies. Where does it start, say, from the prime meridian eastward?
Okay, starting from the prime meridian in Africa, it cuts right into Algeria, then Niger, Libya. It even just nicks the northernmost tip of Chad, very remote desert areas mostly.
Well, Sahara, basically.
A huge chunk of the Sahara, yes. Then it crosses into Egypt, famously going right through Lake Nasser.
The big man-made lake.
That's the one. Further west from the start, it also crosses Western Sahara, that disputed territory, then Mauritania and Mali. Still largely Saharan landscapes.
So Africa is dominated by desert along this line.
Pretty much. Then it crosses the Red Sea.
And into the Middle East.
Right. Saudi Arabia is next, passing not too far from major holy sites and cities like Al-Madinah and Mecca and near Riyadh. Then it clips the UAE, just the Abu Dhabi Emirate, before crossing Oman, including right through its capital, Muscat. Still largely arid, but getting coastal influences.
Okay. Then it hits the Arabian Sea, and after that, Asia.
Big time. It enters India in Gujarat and then cuts across a huge swath of the country: Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, West Bengal, Tripura, Mizoram.
Wow, that's a lot of India. Very diverse regions, too.
Absolutely. Then it goes through Bangladesh, hitting Khulna, Dhaka, and Chittagong divisions, then into Myanmar. After that, it slices through southern China.
Which parts of China?
The provinces of Yunnan, Guangxi, and Guangdong. Interestingly, it passes only about 7 kilometers north of China's border with Vietnam at one point.
Close call.
Yeah. Then it crosses the Taiwan Strait and hits Taiwan itself, places like Hujing Island, Chiayi County, Hualien County.
So a massive contrast already. deserts, densely populated plains, mountains. What's next? Open ocean.
A lot of it. It crosses the Philippine Sea, passing just south of Necker Island, which is part of Hawaii, way out there.
Hawaii. Near the tropic, but not quite on it.
Right. Then it's the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean before it makes landfall again in North America.
Which is Mexico, right?
Yep. It comes ashore in Baja California Sur, crosses the Gulf of California, and then cuts across mainland Mexico states like Sinaloa, Durango, Zacatecas, San Luis Potosí, Nuevo León, and Tamaulipas. Again, really varied terrain.
Deserts, mountains, maybe some more humid areas towards the coast.
Exactly. Then it crosses the Gulf of Mexico, passing just north of Cuba.
So close to Cuba, but misses it.
Just misses it. Then into the Atlantic Ocean proper. It threads through the Straits of Florida, the Nicholas Channel, just south of the Anguilla Cays in the Bahamas, through the Santarin Channel.
Sounds like tricky navigation.
Must be. And then it cuts right through the Bahamas themselves, the Exuma Islands, and Long Island. Finally, it's across the open Atlantic back towards Africa and the Prime Meridian.
What a journey. It really underscores the incredible diversity of environments and cultures packed along that single line of latitude.
Doesn't it? From emptiness to massive cities, deserts to islands.
I mean, you mentioned a lot of deserts, especially in Africa and the Middle East. So is the general climate along the tropic just hot and dry? Is that the rule?
That's definitely the dominant theme, you could say. Hot and dry is a very common climate pattern along or near the Tropic of Cancer. The Sahara is the prime example, covering a huge portion of its path.
But I feel a but coming. There must be exceptions.
You know it. The Earth is rarely that simple. There are some really striking exceptions to that hot and dry rule.
Like what?
Well, for instance, you get much cooler climates in some of the highland regions it crosses, like parts of China. Altitude makes a huge difference.
Okay. Elevation cooling things down. Makes sense.
And then you have the marine environments, like near Hawaii. Even though it's tropical latitude, being surrounded by ocean moderates the temperature significantly compared to the continental deserts.
Right. The ocean effect.
And then maybe the most dramatic exception, some easterly coastal areas get absolutely drenched with rain.
Drenched. How much are we talking?
We're talking about orographic rainfall. That's rain caused by mountains forcing moist air from the ocean upwards.
Oh, okay.
In some spots, particularly in Asia, this process can dump unbelievable amounts of rain, sometimes reaching up to 4 meters. That's about 160 inches annually.
4 meters of rain. That's insane, especially compared to the Sahara nearby, relatively speaking.
It's an incredible contrast, isn't it? Shows how topography and wind patterns can completely override the general latitudinal climate expectation.
So definitely not uniform. What about seasons? Is it just hot year-round or...?
Most places along the tropic tend to have 2 main seasons. You get a really, really hot summer. Temperatures can easily hit 45 degrees Celsius, which is 113 Fahrenheit. Super hot. And then you get a warm winter. It's not cold. Usually maxima are around 22 Celsius, maybe 72 Fahrenheit. Still very pleasant.
Okay, hot summer, warm winter.
But then further east, particularly in places like India, Southeast Asia, southern China, you get the monsoon influence.
The monsoon.
Yeah, so it's more of a torrid monsoonal climate. That means a distinct, short, very intense wet season, usually June to September, and then the rest of the year is much drier.
So different patterns depending where you are along the line. This leads me to something that sounds completely contradictory. You mentioned highlands.
Yeah.
But glaciers.
Yeah.
Is it even possible for glaciers to exist anywhere near the Tropic of Cancer with all this heat we're talking about?
It sounds impossible, doesn't it? Glaciers and tropics in the same breath.
It really does.
But, incredibly, yes, altitude is the key. Think about the highest mountain that's right on or very close to the tropic. That's Yushan, or Jade Mountain, in Taiwan.
Okay, Taiwan. High mountain.
Very high. And during the last major ice age, the last glacial maximum Yushan actually had glaciers that reached down to about 2,800 meters elevation.
Wow. So glaciers on the tropic, historically at least.
Historically, yes. And even today, while maybe not precisely on the line itself, there are still glaciers surprisingly close by.
Really? Where?
Well, just north of the tropic, you have glaciers in the Himalayas, like Mingyong and Baishui. And to the south of the tropic, in Mexico, you have glaciers on Pico de Orizaba, that huge volcano.
Pico de Orizaba, right. I've heard of that.
So even though it's technically within tropical or subtropical latitudes, the extreme altitude allows permanent ice to exist relatively nearby. It really messes with our simple idea of what tropical means.
That's a fantastic counterintuitive point. Glaciers near the tropics. Okay, so Beyond the physical geography and climate, does this line have, I don't know, bigger impacts on human systems, politics, anything like that?
It does. Surprisingly, you wouldn't think an imaginary line could matter that much in, say, geopolitics, but it does.
How so?
One of the most concrete examples is NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Okay, the Defense Alliance.
The Tropic of Cancer actually marks the southern boundary for NATO's mutual defense commitment.
Wait, seriously? The Defense Pact stops at the Tropic of Cancer?
Essentially, yes. Article 6 of the North Atlantic Treaty defines the area covered. While it's been interpreted slightly differently over time, especially regarding islands, the core treaty text references the Tropic of Cancer as a southern limit for an armed attack on member territory that would trigger the Collective Defense Clause.
That's incredible. So an attack on a NATO member's territory south of that line wouldn't automatically trigger Article 5, the all-for-one clause.
That's the general understanding. It's a really clear example of how a geographical line, chosen likely for cartographic convenience long ago, has embedded itself into major international agreements and strategic calculations.
Mind blown again. Okay, what else? Any other surprising impacts?
Well, aviation record-keeping uses it as a benchmark.
Aviation. How?
According to the FAI, that's the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, the World Air Sports Federation, if you want to set an official round-the-world speed record in an aircraft, your flight path has to cover a distance that's at least as long as the circumference of the Earth measured along the Tropic of Cancer.
No way. They use the tropic's length as the minimum distance.
Exactly. That length is specifically calculated as 36,788 kilometers, or about 22,859 miles. You also have to cross all meridians and end up back where you started.
So it's not just flying around the equator or something simpler.
Nope. For the speed record, the Tropic of Cancer distance is the minimum target. For just a basic non-speed record circumnavigation claim, the rules are a tiny bit looser, requiring at least 36,770 kilometers. But still, the tropic serves as that key reference distance.
That's amazing. A line on a map defining the benchmark for global flight endurance and just bringing it back down to Earth. Can you actually see it anywhere? Are there signs?
Oh, yeah, definitely. People like to mark it. There are physical signs and monuments in quite a few of the countries it crosses.
Like where?
Well, there's one south of Dakhla in Western Sahara, apparently put there by rally participants. It's kind of cool because it's inscribed in both English and Hungarian, oddly enough.
How random.
India has several markers near Mehsana City in Gujarat, in Madhya Pradesh, West Bengal, too, I think. Taiwan has a well-known marker in Rusui Township. China even built a dedicated tower of the Tropic of Cancer near Guangzhou.
The tower? Okay, they take it seriously.
They do. So yeah, you can physically go and stand on the line, or at least where a sign says the line is, remembering that it might have drifted a bit since the sign went up.
Right. Got to account for the drift. Well, this has been quite the journey. It's clear the Tropic of Cancer is so much more than just, a line we learned in school.
Absolutely. It's this dynamic feature deeply connected to astronomy, history, climate, geography, even politics, and human achievement.
It really ties together the planet's mechanics with our experience on the surface, full of those unexpected twists like outdated names and nearby glaciers.
It's a great lens through which to see those connections.
So, thinking about all this, if a line we consider so fundamental, so defining, like the Tropic of Cancer, isn't actually fixed but is constantly drifting, and even its name is sort of a historical echo, what does that make us think about other things we consider stable? Other boundaries, concepts, maybe even definitions in our world that seem permanent. Could they also be in this state of subtle, constant flux underneath? It kind of invites you to look a bit closer, doesn't it? To question what seems fixed.
It really does. A reminder that the ground beneath our feet and the lines we draw on it are perhaps more fluid than we often assume.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and get straight to the insights that matter to you. Today, we're plunging into a topic that affects every single one of us, every single day, whether we realize it or not. Food waste. We all know it's a problem, but what if I told you that the way you waste food and why you do it might be completely different from your neighbor? We've got our hands on a truly fascinating study today, commissioned by the European Union. This isn't just a small survey, it's a massive undertaking, involving over 25,000 participants across all 27 member states. It's a A treasure trove of insights into how you and your fellow consumers manage food in daily life, right down to what ends up in the bin.
That's absolutely right. And this isn't merely about tallying the quantity of food wasted, though that's significant enough. It delves much deeper into the underlying motivations, the conscious and unconscious behaviors that lead to food being thrown away. Our mission today is really to extract the most important nuggets from this extensive research, helping you understand not just that food waste happens, but the distinct consumer types behind it, what truly drives their actions, and crucially, what kinds of solutions might actually be effective. Think of this deep dive as your shortcut, maybe, to understanding a complex issue with surprising clarity and practical application.
Okay, so before we jump into the different consumer types, maybe let's zoom out a bit. Why did the European Commission decide to dive this deep into our bins in the first place? What makes consumer food waste such a significant area of study that warrants, such a large-scale investigation?
Well, the sheer scale of food waste is staggering, and its implications are just immense. Globally, you're looking at roughly 1/3 of the food produced for human consumption being lost or wasted. And in the EU alone, it's estimated that households, actual homes like yours, are responsible for over 50% of the total food waste.
Wow, over 50%.
Right.
Just from households.
Exactly. And when you consider the environmental cost, all the resources like water, land, energy used to produce food that's never eaten, plus the greenhouse gas emissions from landfills when it decomposes, it's a significant burden. Economically, it's money literally thrown away.
Right.
By households and businesses. And socially, well, it's food that could have fed people in need. So understanding why and how consumers waste food is the first and most critical step towards creating effective strategies to reduce it. This study moves beyond just simple, broad awareness campaigns to truly segment and understand the different mindsets at play.
Okay.
It's about moving from those general appeals to really targeted, impactful action. That's where the real difference can be made.
That makes perfect sense. It's not just a moral issue then, it's clearly an economic and environmental imperative too. Okay, let's unpack this. The study identified 3 distinct consumer types when it comes to food waste. And this is a key takeaway, right? It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all problem. So who are these 3 groups and what makes them tick?
Precisely. The research highlights that our motivations and behaviors around food are, well, far from uniform. We can broadly categorize consumers into 3 groups, each with their own distinct characteristics and reasons for wasting food.
Fascinating. So let's pull back the curtain on our first group. These are the unconcerned food wasters, making up a substantial portion, about 40% of EU consumers. What defines them?
What defines the unconcerned food waster is primarily personal interest and convenience. They're not really driven by broader societal or environmental concerns when it comes to food management, Demographically, they tend to lean younger, with nearly half, 48%, under 35 years old, and there's a slight male skew at 56%.
Okay, younger, slightly more male.
And when they're making purchasing decisions, taste and cost are paramount. Those are the big ones. Environmental and ethical considerations. They fall much lower on their list of priorities.
That sounds like a real focus on immediate gratification, maybe. Like what's easy and cheap right now. And the study reveals some pretty surprising habits within this group. 60% of them report throwing food away daily, and another 30% weekly. But here's the kicker. Even though 73% always check date labels, a shockingly low 16% correctly follow what use by and best before dates actually mean. That's a huge gap between checking and understanding, isn't it?
It really is.
It suggests that simply seeing the label isn't enough. The meaning just isn't sinking in. How might that gap inform the solutions we offer them?
Well, that gap is a critical insight. It highlights a fundamental disconnect. For these unconcerned wasters, it's not necessarily a lack of access to information, but perhaps a lack of engagement with it. Or maybe a lack of perceived relevance, if they're prioritizing convenience and cost. They might see date labels as just another hassle or an abstract concept rather than a practical guide. So the solutions for them can't just be about providing more information. That probably won't stick. They need to be framed in a way that aligns with their existing motivations, like saving money or avoiding perceived risk, perhaps, and maybe making the information incredibly simple and easy to process.
That makes perfect sense. You need a hook that resonates with their primary drivers.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's move on to our next group, which is actually the largest. The pragmatic food wasters. These make up 44% of EU consumers. So for this group, it sounds like their motivation shifts towards more practical considerations. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. The pragmatic food wasters are indeed driven by more practical considerations in their daily food management. They tend to be an older demographic, with about 77% over 35, and they are predominantly female at 63%.
Okay, older, more female.
Now, like the unconcerned group, their purchasing habits are heavily influenced by cost and taste. Those are still important. However, they do show a kind of mid-level consideration for environment and ethics. It indicates a slightly broader awareness, perhaps, but maybe not a driving force in the same way cost is.
Okay, so a bit more aware, but still prioritizing the basics. But for this pragmatic group, despite checking labels frequently, about 46% always do. The study points to a truly shocking statistic. Only 4% correctly follow use by and best before instructions. Just 4%. What do you make of that?
It feels like a real missed opportunity for them, especially if they're otherwise practical. I have to admit, I've definitely been a pragmatic waster myself sometimes, staring at something in the fridge, wondering, is this really bad? And just defaulting to caution.
You've hit on a crucial point there, and yeah, your personal experience resonates with what the data suggests. While the pragmatic group might be more inclined to take action against waste than the unconcerned,
They seem to lack the specific knowledge or maybe the skills to translate that intention into effective behavior, especially around those date labels. It's not necessarily a lack of care, but more like a knowledge gap that leads to what we might call aspirational waste reduction.
aspirational waste reduction, I like that.
Yeah, they want to do better, but don't quite know how. And that incredibly low 4% indicates a really deep-seated confusion about those labels. This group would likely benefit immensely from clear, actionable guidance. Things like food storage tips, meal planning help, and definitely date label interpretation.
Wow, only 4%. That's a powerful statistic showing just how widespread the confusion is. Okay, finally, we have our third group, the smallest at 16% of EU consumers, the aware food wasters. I imagine these folks have a more holistic approach.
Indeed. The aware food wasters, they really stand apart. They are also generally older, similar to the pragmatics, with 78% over 35, and predominantly female at 55%. But what truly distinguishes them is that their purchasing decisions are highly impacted by all factors: taste, cost, environment, and ethics. They demonstrate a much more balanced, all-encompassing approach to food. They're actively considering the broader implications.
So this is the group that's really thinking about the big picture. How does their date marking behavior compare then? Still a problem.
Well, while it's still not perfect, their behavior does show a better understanding. 47% always check labels, which is similar to the pragmatics, but a comparatively higher 19% correctly follow the use by and best before dates.
Okay, 19% is better than 4% or 16%, but still.
Exactly. It suggests a better understanding and perhaps a greater effort to use food responsibly. But it still shows there's room for improvement across the board, even for the most aware consumers. It's clearly not a solved problem for anyone.
That's a critical point to underscore. So what strikes me as a common thread across all three groups, despite their differences, is that a significant majority, 60% daily, 30% weekly, still report throwing food away. It's not if people waste food, but why they do it and the motivations behind it that truly differentiates them. And that why often circles back to some fundamental misunderstandings, doesn't it? Like those date labels.
Absolutely. And that brings us to what I found to be one of the most surprising universal challenges.
Yeah.
The date markings. It seems to be a struggle that cuts across all these consumer types, even the aware ones.
Yep.
It implies that the issue isn't just about consumer education, maybe, but perhaps the clarity of the labels themselves.
You're absolutely right. The study highlights that all consumer groups can benefit significantly from actions to improve their understanding of what use by and best before truly mean. It's such a fundamental piece of information that, if misunderstood, directly leads to unnecessary waste. I mean, if you're throwing something out because you misinterpret a best before date as a use by, that's easily preventable waste right there.
Precisely.
So this raises an important question. Are our labels clear enough? Or do we need to simplify the communication around them, perhaps even standardize them more across the EU?
That's exactly the discussion we need to be having. The current system, despite being designed to inform, often creates confusion, and that leads to both potential health risks if use by is ignored and unnecessary waste if best before is misinterpreted as an expiry date. Simplifying the language, maybe using clearer icons, or even introducing consumer-friendly guides that are easily accessible could make a world of difference.
Yeah.
It's really a shared responsibility, isn't it, between producers, regulators, and us as consumers to bridge that knowledge gap.
So it's not just about who you are, but also where you are.
Yeah.
How does this study approach geographic differences? Because the research didn't just look at individuals, right? It also grouped countries based on the prevalence of these consumer types. What does that tell us?
Yes, and this reveals a critical point. Food waste behaviors aren't just individual choices. They seem to be deeply influenced by broader cultural, economic, and behavioral factors that are unique to each country. The study identified 4 distinct country groups, each with a different dominant profile of wasters. For example, in Group A, which includes countries like Austria and Germany, we see a high prevalence of pragmatic food wasters, often around 50–60%.
Ah, okay, the practical ones.
Exactly. These are countries where perhaps practical support and skill building might yield the biggest impact.
And what about the other groups? Can you give us a quick snapshot?
Sure. Group B countries, for instance, often show a more even mix of all 3 types, which suggests a need for maybe a more multi-pronged approach there. Then there's Group C, which includes places like France and Spain. These are characterized by high levels of both aware food wasters and unconcerned food wasters.
Oh, interesting. Both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, for example, in France, it's about 38% unconcerned and 46% aware. That's a really interesting dynamic to manage. And finally, Group D might be dominated more heavily by unconcerned wasters, indicating perhaps a primary need to shift motivation first in those countries.
So understanding these regional differences is vital because it means that a one-size-fits-all approach to reducing food waste just won't cut it.
Exactly.
That makes perfect sense, but it also sounds incredibly complex to manage on a European scale. Is it really feasible to tailor interventions so specifically? Or are there some universal principles we can still lean on?
That's a very fair question about the practicality of implementation. And yes, it is complex, but the study argues that generic campaigns often fall flat because they don't resonate with everyone's specific mindset or needs. However, universal principles like simplifying date labeling, which we just talked about, or promoting fundamental food management skills, those would certainly benefit all groups. But for maximum impact, strategies really do need to be adapted, at least somewhat, to each country's national context and its specific mix of consumer types. It's probably about combining universal best practices with more targeted initiatives.
Right, okay. This deep dive isn't just about identifying problems, though. It's ultimately about finding solutions. The study offers concrete recommendations for targeted actions based on these consumer types. This is where it gets really actionable for all of us, hopefully.
Indeed. And the findings strongly suggest that actions tailored to address each consumer type's specific motivations, skills, and abilities are much more likely to be effective. The recommendations fall into 3 key categories: informative actions, practical tools, and coaching or support.
Okay, let's break that down. For our unconcerned food wasters, the ones prioritizing convenience and cost, what's the recommended approach? How do you reach them?
Well, for them, the advice is really to aim to change motivations and engagement before providing too much practical advice. Just flooding them with tips won't work if they don't care to begin with, right?
Makes sense.
So this could involve informative actions that powerfully combine cost-saving messages with other relatable arguments, maybe highlighting the hidden costs of food waste in a way that hits home, or tools like really simple shopping lists, maybe informative fridge magnets, but always paired with broader awareness campaigns that resonate with their lifestyle. Coaching can also be beneficial, but recruitment strategies need to be clever, tailored to grab their attention first, perhaps through social media or even gaming platforms. You need to meet them where they are.
So for them, it's about making it feel personally beneficial and super easy.
Got it. What about the pragmatic food wasters, our largest group? The ones who want to do better but struggle with the how? For pragmatic food wasters, the focus is squarely on bridging that gap between intention and action with practical support. They're often open to learning, so they need tangible resources. Think cooking apps that suggest recipes based on leftover ingredients you actually have.
Oh, yeah. Those are useful.
Simple recipe cards for common items, or even things like curated meal kits that help them use everything efficiently. They are likely to benefit most from hands-on coaching, maybe workshops, training sessions, and these should be targeted to their specific practical needs: how to store produce correctly, how to revive wilted greens, the real meaning of date labels. It's about building confidence and skills.
That makes perfect sense. Practical solutions for practical people. Okay. And finally, for our aware food wasters, the ones with the holistic mindset, how do we best support them to reduce waste even further?
Yeah.
They're already doing well, right?
Right, but there's still room for improvement. For aware food wasters, the goal is to further influence both motivations and refine their behavior. They already have a strong base, as you say. The study describes them as the most likely to enroll in coaching activities, which suggests a readiness to engage with more structured learning. Things like advanced cooking workshops, maybe food preservation demonstrations, or even community-based composting initiatives. For them, it might be about optimizing existing good habits, exploring innovative solutions, or maybe even becoming advocates or mentors themselves.
And beyond these tailored approaches, it seems there are some overarching principles for all groups, things that work no matter who you are.
Absolutely. Crucially, for all groups, we need to improve understanding of date marking labels. That's a universal challenge that needs a universal solution. We keep coming back to that.
Yeah, definitely.
And a general principle across all interventions, regardless of the target group. Keep it simple. Avoid information overload, because that can just lead to paralysis. And importantly, use positive, empowering messages rather than guilt trips. Focus on what people can do, not just what they're doing wrong.
What an eye-opening deep dive into the psychology of our bins, really. It's so clear that food waste isn't a single monolithic problem, but this complex tapestry woven from diverse motivations and behaviors. Understanding these distinct consumer types, the unconcerned, the pragmatic, and the aware, feel like our first real step towards truly effective solutions. It really makes you think differently about that leftover in your fridge.
Exactly. And this deep dive encourages us all, I think, to think critically about how we communicate about food waste and how we intervene. Knowledge, as always, is most valuable when it's understood and applied. By recognizing these different consumer profiles, whether it's in our own habits, our homes, or our communities, we can craft strategies that actually resonate, rather than just, hoping for a universal solution to magically stick.
So for you, our listener, what stands out most from this study? As you reflect on your own habits or maybe observe others, which food waster type resonates most with you? Or maybe you see bits of all three. And armed with this newfound understanding, what small targeted action might you consider taking or advocating for in your own community to make a real difference? Perhaps it's just clarifying a date label for a friend, or finally trying that meal prep app you downloaded ages ago. Something to mull over as you plan your next grocery run and maybe peek into your fridge tonight. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We sift through the sources, cut through the noise, and bring you the core insights you need. Today we're looking at a figure who really reshaped ancient Greece, but maybe doesn't get the same spotlight as, say, Alcibiades. We're talking about Lysander, a master strategist, a deal maker, and, let's be honest, often pretty ruthless. We're digging into his story, using a detailed Wikipedia entry as our guide, trying to unpack his rise, his impact, and, well, his controversial legacy. Our mission, to figure out how he ended the massive Peloponnesian War, set up Spartan dominance, and left such a mark.
Absolutely. Lysander, Spartan commander, statesman, he was just crucial for Sparta's final victory. But what really sets him apart, I think, is his ambition. It wasn't just about winning. He had this vision, this idea of replacing the entire Athenian Empire with Spartan hegemony. That was a step beyond what most Spartans were thinking.
All right, so the question for you listening is, how did this guy from what sounds like pretty humble beginnings climb so high? How did he completely change the map, politically speaking? Yeah. And what does his story tell us about leadership, maybe ambition, and how history remembers people? Let's find out.
Okay, so Lysander's early life. It's a bit murky, but what we do know is pretty interesting. Born around 454 BC. His father, Aristocratus, part of the Heraclidae, descended from Heracles, noble lineage, but definitely not Spartan royalty. And then there's this persistent rumor that his mother might have been a helot, a slave. Plutarch mentions him growing up poor.
Yeah, poor, but with, as Plutarch puts it, obedience and a manly spirit.
Yeah.
Quite the starting point. And that background, it's important context. It also connects to that Spartan custom, the Aeschylus, the inspirer or mentor role, sometimes called a lover, too, in that specific mentorship sense. It was this really deep personal bond. And Lysander apparently was the Aeschylus for the future king Agesilaus II.
Oh. Which hints at, these complex personal ties weaving through Spartan politics. It definitely affected their relationship later on.
It's still pretty amazing, though, isn't it? Almost nothing is known about his career before BAM. He's elected admiral in 408 BC, right in the middle of the war. How does someone without that long public track record, especially not being royal, suddenly get such a huge job?
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Maybe Sparta just needed someone different, someone who understood the sea, diplomacy, maybe even money. Things that weren't necessarily traditional Spartan strengths. And Lysander, he seemed to have that mix. Once he got the job, he moved fast, got 30 triremes together from Gythium, sailed the Aegean, and crucially, he sets up Ephesus as the main Peloponnesian League naval base in the region. Smart move. Strategic hub.
And it wasn't just ships. This is where his skill in diplomacy and finance really comes into play. He meets Cyrus the Younger.
Right, son of the Persian king Darius II. Cyrus was there to basically boost Persian aid to Sparta.
So Lysander goes to Sardis, meets him, and apparently uses this calculated deference, really impresses the young prince.
He did. They formed this close friendship, which turned out to be absolutely vital. Yeah, pivotal is the word, because that friendship meant serious cash for Sparta. Cyrus agreed to up the pay for Lysander's crews, went from 3 obols to 4.
Well, okay.
Think about it. Better pay means happier sailors, fewer desertions, a better fighting force. And importantly for Lysander, it made him incredibly popular with his own men, built loyalty.
But he didn't stop there. His political game was strong, too. Back in Ephesus, he calls together all these powerful oligarchs from different Greek cities. He gets them to form these things called heteriot, basically political clubs, and he makes them a promise.
A very tempting promise. Help me beat Athens, and I'll put you in charge of your cities afterwards.
Exactly. So he's building this personal network, people loyal directly to him, not just to Sparta as a state. It's quite innovative, really. You could already see his tactical mind at work earlier, like at the Battle of Nocium in 406 BC. Alcibiades is leading the Athenian fleet nearby. Lysander has his ships in Ephesus, but he doesn't jump into a big battle straight away.
No, he was way too clever for that. He used those higher wages, the ones funded by Cyrus, to tempt Athenian sailors to desert, just weaken them bit by bit. He was patient, waited for his chance. It came when an Athenian officer actually against orders attacked a small group of Peloponnesian ships. Lysander saw the opening, ordered his whole fleet in, and routed them. Wasn't a massive battle maybe, but a significant win.
And it hurt Alcibiades badly, right? Contributed to his final fall from grace.
It definitely did. Bad timing for Alcibiades.
But then Lysander hits a snag. This quirky Spartan law. You can't be admiral twice in a row, so he has to step down. Callicratidas replaces him. But get this, before he leaves, Lysander gives all the Persian money back to Cyrus.
Yeah, which sounds noble maybe, but it was pure calculation. He basically kneecapped his successor. Callicratidas couldn't fund the fleet properly.
It just shows his ambition, doesn't it? Willing to hinder the war effort, temporarily at least, to ensure he remained indispensable.
But he wasn't gone for long. Callicratidas was killed in battle. And then both Cyrus and Lysander's oligarch network basically demanded Sparta send Lysander back.
So they wanted him back specifically.
They did. Powerful backing. Spartan law was still an issue, so they used a workaround. He was made a Pistolius, like a chief of staff's second in command. The new admiral was a guy named Arachus, but everyone knew Lysander was really running the show. He went back to Ephesus, got Cyrus's full support again, and started rebuilding the fleet.
And his return seems to mark a shift towards even more ruthless methods. While rebuilding the fleet, he goes to Miletus, supposedly an ally, and during a festival, he arranges this massacre of leading Democrats, just wipes them out to install his own oligarchic supporters.
Yeah, that was brutal. Even for Spartan standards, his systematic replacement of governments with his own loyalists was intense. It wasn't just about winning battles anymore. Around this time, his big benefactor, Cyrus, gets called away. His father, King Darius, is dying. But before Cyrus leaves, he does something extraordinary. He hands over his entire treasury and all the revenues from the Persian cities he controlled directly to Lysander.
Wow. That's incredible trust. And power.
Immense. Shows you just how much Cyrus believed in him and how much influence Lysander now wielded.
So the stage is set. Lysander sails out with maybe 125, 150 ships. Early on, more brutality, massacring and enslaving the people of Isis and Sadria, Athenian allies. Then he heads for the Hellespont. This is crucial because it threatens Athens' grain supply from the Black Sea.
Exactly, a direct threat to their survival. The Athenian fleet, all 180 ships, has to follow him.
They end up facing each other across the strait. Lysander at Lampsacus, which he plunders, the Athenians at Aegospotami.
And Lysander plays a waiting game again. For days, he refuses battle, just watches them, studies their routines, until he spots his moment. The Athenians are careless. Most of their crews are ashore, foraging, unprepared. Lysander attacks. Swift, total surprise. Catches them completely unmanned, as the sources say, destroys the entire fleet, 180 ships gone. Just like that.
And that?
Yeah.
That was basically the end of the Peloponnesian War. Decades of fighting over in one decisive, ruthless move. Athenian sea power shattered.
An absolute turning point. Complete command of the sea. So Lysander goes on this victory tour around the Aegean, cities surrender, and his plan for Athens itself, brutal but strategically brilliant. He orders all the captured Athenian garrisons, any Athenian colonists he finds, send them all back to Athens.
Why? To overcrowd the city.
Precisely. Deliberately engineer famine and hasten their surrender. Clinical. Ruthless. Effective.
And this wasn't just military dominance, it was political reshaping. In city after city, he kicks out the existing governments and installs Dicarches.
Right, these 10-man boards, all picked from his hetairai, those political clubs he'd set up. His guys.
Backed by a Spartan military governor, a harmist. Anyone who resisted, especially Democrats, massacred or banished.
Though he did make some gestures, like restoring populations the Athenians had kicked out from places like Aegina. A bit of propaganda, maybe, presenting himself as a liberator to some. But the fall of Athens itself, spring 404 BC, that's the image that sticks. Lysander sails into the Piraeus, Athens port, and he does it on the anniversary of the Battle of Salamis.
Wow, the ultimate symbolic insult. Salamis was Athens' greatest naval triumph.
Exactly. Then he orders the long walls torn down, the fleet burned, and that detail. He brings in female flute players to provide music while the walls are being destroyed.
Just rubbing it in. Pure political theater. After that, he presides over the Athenian assembly, gets them to vote away their own democracy, replaces it with the 30 tyrants.
Infamous. A board of 30 oligarchs loyal to Sparta, or rather loyal to Lysander's system.
And he ties up loose ends, too. Arranges for his old rival, Alcibiades, who's in exile trying to get Persian help to be assassinated.
Yeah, removes any potential threat. Very thorough, very ruthless. But here's a really significant consequence, something that changes Sparta itself. Lysander brings back enormous wealth, spoils of war, money. Now, for centuries, private money had been illegal in Sparta. Austerity, military virtue, that was the ideal. But, the new navy needed funding.
So money starts flowing in.
It does. And Plutarch, writing later, really condemns this. He argues that just having the money around corrupted ordinary Spartans, broke down the old discipline. We even see examples like General Gylippus caught embezzling treasure he was supposed to bring home, sentenced to death for it.
So it immediately starts causing problems, introduces temptation, greed into this famously austere society. And Lysander's group wasn't absolute. Cracks started appearing. You get this democratic resistance led by an Athenian general, Thrasybulus. He'd been exiled by the 30 tyrants.
In 403 BC, Thrasybulus leads a small force back into Attica, fights a couple of battles. He actually defeats a Spartan garrison, and then he defeats the forces of the oligarchs, Lysander's guys, in the Battle of Munichia. Critias, the head tyrant, gets killed.
That's a major blow to Lysander's setup.
It is. The Spartans send more troops and defeat the exiles in another battle near Piraeus. But then something unexpected happens. King Pausanias of Sparta steps in. And despite Lysander arguing against it, Pausanias negotiates a settlement.
A settlement? What kind?
One that actually allowed democracy to be restored in Athens. A huge reversal.
Wow. So even within Sparta, there were limits to how far they'd back Lysander's personal project. A real check on his power. But he still had clout back home. He was key in getting Agesilaus II, remember, his former protege, the one he mentored, selected as the next Spartan king.
Right, after King Aegeus II died.
And he also convinced Sparta to back Cyrus the Younger's rebellion against his brother, Artaxerxes.
Right.
That didn't end well for Cyrus, but it shows Lysander was still influencing big decisions.
Definitely. And he was still trying to push his own agenda. He engineers the situation where Agesilaus gets command of the Greek forces fighting against Persia over in Asia Minor, around 396 BC. Lysander probably figured this would give him an opportunity, maybe command of other forces, let him rebuild his network of oligarchies.
Ah, but here's where the protege turns on the mentor. Agesilaus apparently was getting tired of Lysander acting like he was the real power behind the throne.
Resentful, yeah.
So Agesilaus deliberately thwarts Lysander's plans. He sidelines him, gives him some command way up in the Hellespont, far from the main action, far from Sparta.
A very clear message, a power struggle right at the top. Agesilaus putting his old mentor in his place, and these internal tensions spill over. Back in Sparta by 395 BC, Lysander is apparently a key figure in pushing for a new war, this time against Thebes and its allies. This becomes the Corinthian War. Sparta starts gearing up to fight this new coalition. Athens is back in the game, Thebes, Corinth, Argos, and they've got Persian backing this time. Agesilaus gets recalled from Asia Minor.
And this leads to Lysander's final act, the Battle of Haliartus, 395 BC. Sparta plans a two-pronged attack on the Boeotian city of Haliartus. One army under Lysander, one under King Pausanias. They're supposed to meet up. Lysander gets there first. True to form, he persuades another city, Orchomenus, to revolt against the Boeotians. Then he marches on Haliartus.
But he gets too close to the walls, makes a tactical error. The Thebans inside attack, and Lysander is killed in the fighting.
Just like that, a sudden end. A fatal miscalculation for a man known for his meticulous planning.
And even after he's dead, the intrigue continues. Agesilaus II, his rival, claims to discover this plot Lysander supposedly hatched, a scheme to change the Spartan kingship itself, make it collective, maybe elective, take away the king's automatic command of the army, basically a power grab.
Was it real? Or just Agesilaus trying to smear his dead rival?
Historians still debate it, but, as Nigel Kennel points out, the alleged plot does kind of fit with what we know about Lysander's personality, his ambition, so maybe. It adds another layer of controversy to his legacy.
So wrapping this all up, Lysander, what a figure. Brilliant strategist, absolutely ruthless. He makes Sparta the top dog in Greece. But in the process, he introduces things, money, maybe corruption, extreme political manipulation that kind of undermine traditional Spartan ways. Master of war, master of politics.
His legacy is just so mixed. Cornelius Nepos, the Roman writer, calls him cruel and perfidious. But Xenophon, who knew the era, points out he sometimes spared populations. And then you have this extraordinary fact. Cities apparently set up altars to him, sacrificed to him like a god. The first Greek to receive that honor, according to Joris of Samos. They even renamed the festival of Hera in Samos the Lysandreia. That's huge. Shows incredible prestige, even a reverence, despite everything else.
And those sayings attributed to him, they just capture him perfectly. Where the lion's skin does not reach, it must be patched with the fox's. Genius.
Pure pragmatism.
And boasting about cheating boys with knuckle bones and men with oaths tells you everything about his cynical view of the world, maybe. So, thinking about Lysander really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Is achieving that level of success, that kind of world-changing power, worth the compromises? Do the ends justify means that are, well, often brutal and deceptive? His life kind of throws that question right at you. Can someone be admired and hated for the exact same reasons? A liberator to some, a tyrant to others? Definitely something to chew on long after this deep dive.